Welcome. Okay, I would like to welcome everyone back. But before we jump into it, please turn your attention to our interpretation team.
Gracias, Levon. Buen día a todos. Soy Lars y junto con Erwin representamos la Cooperativa de Justicia del Lenguaje Tilde. Estaremos ofreciendo interpretación simultánea entre el inglés y el español hoy. Hello, everyone. My name is Lars, and together with Erwin, we represent the Tilde Language Justice Cooperative. We will be providing simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish today. Esta reunión será bilingüe. Si usted domina ambos el inglés y el español, no tiene que hacer nada, pero si prefiere el español, por favor seleccione el canal de español. Si usa una computadora, haga clic en el globito con interpretación, o si está usando la aplicación de Zoom en su teléfono o tableta, haga clic en los tres puntitos, luego interpretación de idiomas, luego español y finalizado. Desafortunadamente no se puede acceder a interpretación a través de los Chromebooks ni aparatos de Linux. This town hall will be held bilingually. If you're comfortable with both Spanish and English, you don't need to do anything, but if you prefer to use English, please make sure to select the English channel. If you're using a computer, click on the globe icon that says Interpretation, or if you're using the Zoom app on your phone or tablet, click on the three dots, then Language Interpretation, then English, then Done. Interpretation is unfortunately not available on Chromebooks or Linux-based devices. Unos breves recordatorios para que promovamos juntos un espacio de la justicia del lenguaje. Por favor, silencie su micrófono cuando no esté hablando. Si no domina el inglés, sintoniza la interpretación con sus controles de Zoom para participar plenamente. Y si sintoniza un canal de lenguaje, favor de hablar solamente el idioma de tal canal. Pedimos también a todas las presentadoras y presentadores que hablen claro y despacio, especialmente si están leyendo, y favor de hablar solo un idioma por intervención o frase. A couple quick reminders to help us build a space of language justice together. Please mute your mic when you're not speaking. If you're not comfortable communicating in Spanish, be sure to connect to an interpretation channel so you can participate fully. And if you do join a language channel, please only speak the language of that channel. We also ask all presenters to speak slowly and clearly, especially if you're reading, and please speak only one language per intervention or sentence. Gracias por ayudarnos a crear este espacio multilingüe. Thanks for helping us create this multilingual space. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is our second day, and we are back. And we here in our CDV and our other presenters, we are in our committee. We are so thankful for you joining us again on this second day of great excitement again. And so with that, I want to say hello and welcome to our second day of our National Prevention Town Hall. I am, again, the same person, Levon Mars Grant, Director of Community Engagement with the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. At this time, please welcome Tia Bahozhoni, Dean, Woman, and Policy Specialist for the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, who will open the space for us today. Thank you, Tia.
Thank you, Levon. Te she Tia Bahozhoni Yinishya. Nashasha Nishlan, Sedishkiji Bashashin, Tachini Che, Kia Ani Dashanella. Hello, everyone. My name is Tia Bahozhoni. I am Dene. I'm a policy specialist with the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. I use pronouns she and her. And today I'm wearing an olive green collared shirt, pink beaded earrings made lovingly by a friend, and I'm wearing my hair down. I'm zooming in from the ancestral land and territory of the Nichui, as well as lands that are culturally and ceremonially significant to the Hickory Apache pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi Sanam, and Diné. I'm happy and grateful to be here and share space with you all today, and I'm honored to welcome everyone into this space, just as you are. For transparency's sake, I'm coming into this space as I am, and just to name it, I am feeling very nervous but excited and grateful to be here. I am part of the planning committee who helped to create and organize this event with the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, or NRCDV. I would like to take some time to give specific shout outs to all the organizations and folks who helped put this prevention town hall together. I'd like to thank Roshan Kalantar from Violence Free Colorado, Nish Newton from Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence, and a local activist with the Black Liberation Collective. Nish is also going to be facilitating today's panel. Virginia Perez Ortega from New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs, I beg your pardon. Jody Sanborn from Wyoming Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assaults. Casey Keene, Brecken Winters, Levon Morris Brandt, and everyone at NRCDV. And of course, the numerous programs, organizations, and collectives that are sharing their knowledge, experience, and missions with all of us here today. And I'd like to, I know the purpose of an opening is to introduce the whole event, but for those who haven't yet experienced one before, I'd like to give you a little bit of background of the purpose of the National Prevention Town Hall.
What are you knocking over, Lucifer?
Or a refresher for those who are coming back. Each year, the NRCDV collaborates with partners in specific regions from across the country that are part of the movement to bring an end to domestic violence in all its forms and intersections in all communities. This collaboration results in a town hall that highlights the ongoing efforts of advocacy. It reaffirms the goals we all hold dear to us as advocates, activists, organizers, and community members. It is a space to share what's working and relaying the unique challenges across the country in an effort to, mitigate the challenges that might seem universal to all of us. And this is all with the intention of understanding the dynamics and connections through a transformative approach. This event is all in an effort to create a strong-hearted community by cultivating relationships through intentional communication. In the past, focus points and themes emerged from different regions, and some examples are the integration of anti-racism work, intervention, and prevention into one mission. Another explored how our work is connected to and impacted by our current social and political reality, and what part of us each plays actualizing that collective liberation. I personally believe and feel that spaces like these are incredibly valuable, especially in a world seemingly overrun by violence that often encourages disconnection. I believe that these connections that I've made and the knowledge shared have made me feel less alone and more inspired. This year, the collaboration has created a town hall based around the question, what does prevention look like when rooted in community and culture outside of systems? With this question as our guiding light, the collaboration has brought together various change-making projects, collectives, and approaches that work within community for community in order to broaden connections and center survivor healing, which in turn heals and protects community. Today we will be hearing from these collectives. Paradise Newton will be sharing reflections and missions and general information from Black Liberation Collective. Michael Trim will be representing Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. Then we'll hear from Maribel Garza from Enlace Comunitario Youth Leaders. And we'll also hear from Nathana Bird from Tewa Women United. and they'll each share their programs and work in general. Afterwards, there will be a panel discussion. So now that I've given you sort of an idea of the roadmap for today, as a way to set the tone and goal of today's event, I was hoping you all would join me in a practice of grounding. I'd like to set aside some intentional space to share gratitude and honor those who have brought us together. So if you would like to join me, and I do encourage you to do so because it helps me at least. If you feel comfortable, I'd like you to close your eyes or just have hold your eyes in a soft gaze, sort of downward. And I'd like to ground ourselves, like I said, in some breathing and gratitude. So I just want to take some time to, notice if there's any sort of tension in your shoulders or in your jaw. I get very tense behind my eyes. So just noticing where you could release some of that tension with your breathing. Breathe in slowly and as deeply as you can and are comfortable with. And with each breath, I'd like you to envision the person or people who have uplifted you to be where you're at. With each intake of breath, I ask you to hold those people in your hearts. And with each exhale, give them gratitude and honor them in a way that makes sense to you. Maybe do one more round of breathing. And as we gently come back into this virtual space, I want to send a gentle reminder that you are never alone. Remember that your presence in this movement is the result of countless generations of survivors and healers, that your ancestors and supporters will always be with you. To end this opening, I'd like to share a poem by the artist Nadina Mitchell. It's called Our Hands Come from the Land. Tilling the soil, planting the seeds of corn, of beans, of squash, herding the sheep, rearing them, shearing them for weaving. The hands have been weathered for generations. With them, we reach out for help. It is okay. We do it in prayer, in community, by walking in beauty. For love for ourselves and each other. It is resilience. It is resistance. And with that, I'd love to hand it back off to Lavon.
Thank you, Tia. Wow. Thank you for grounding us all and bringing us all back into the space and into connection with ourselves. Thank you so much. Now we will move to today's gallery tour of programs featuring the Black Liberation Collective, Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico, Enlace Community Youth Leaders, the Tewa Women United. Each program will offer a brief presentation, and afterwards, we will engage the speakers in a panel discussion. Please refer to the event program for full speakers' bios and program descriptions. If you have any questions, pose to the panel as you move through the gallery tour. Please feel free to share those in the chat. Please welcome back Andre Medina of On the Right Mind, who will be providing a live graphic illustration of today's conversation. You can view Andre's art as we move through our time together today, and we will be sure to share this illustration with all participants. At this time, please join me in welcoming Paradise Newton from the Black Liberation Collective of Idaho.
Hi, everybody, and good morning. I'm really thankful for this opportunity to speak here. And as Lavon was saying, my name is Paradise, and my pronouns are she and they. And I'm here today representing the Black Liberation Collective. We're an organization that's composed of Black trans people from Boise, Idaho. And in the Black Liberation Collective, I have a few roles. I do a little bit of admin work, fundraising, and I'm also an assistant in our Journey program. Our work focuses on uplifting those most marginalized in our area, and we believe deeply that by supporting the most vulnerable in our community, we uplift our community as a whole. In our area in Boise and the whole country, there's a vast violence against trans people. It's written into laws, etched into the system, and perpetuated by indifference. In Idaho, we serve Black trans people in an environment where white supremacy is not just present, but proudly on display. Like many rural states, Idaho is a desert of resources, and in recent years especially, anti-trans climate has grown at an alarming pace. It's fueled by legislation, and it becomes harder each day for our community to thrive and to just simply survive. At BLC, we do a lot of our work. We strive to have it rooted in ancestral wisdom, youth-led innovation, and healing-centered liberation. These are guiding principles that allow us to advance social justice and human rights, even in the face of horrendous attacks on Black trans people. And we use those programs to, or we use those principles to guide all of our programs. And our programs, I do want to give a brief highlight of the work that we do, especially our big three, what I call our three kind of most impactful programs so far. One is called Black Power. And Black Power is a mutual aid program. It's a program that's designed to provide Black trans Idahoans with a $1,000 stipend each month for a full year. The financial stability, it doesn't just bring temporary relief, but we believe that it brings healing. When we support someone who's been economically excluded for generations, we're offering the possibility of a life where survival isn't the only goal. And we've seen firsthand how the profound impact of this program has had on recipients' well-being, and it's our hope that we can continue to build a base of Black trans leaders across Idaho and connect them to resources and to each other. And for our Black Power program, I do have just a quote from one of our 2023 recipients, our 2023 cohort, and it just says that from participating in this program, they were able to clear up a lot of their credit and clear up a lot of the debt that they were put in even before they were 18, clear up credit card debt, and also be able to get their name legally changed. So that's just a little glimpse of the impact from the Black Power program. And then another one of our big three, number 2, is our Journey program. And with this program, we recognize that bodily autonomy is a fundamental human right. Our Journey program actualizes the dream of gender-affirming care for Black trans Idahoans. We're not just talking about care that's accessible, we're talking about care that's affirming and supportive. From hormone therapy to surgeries, we walk alongside our participants, ensuring that they don't have to navigate those hurdles alone. And we don't stop at medical care. We also partner with reproductive justice organizations and mental health advocates and others to provide a holistic support. Through this program, we reclaim bodily autonomy in a state where trans people's bodies are so often politicized, legislated, and attacked. And we work toward a future where medical justice isn't just a dream, but a reality for every Black trans person in Idaho. And just a fact about our Journey program, a part of this program is covering non-traditional costs. So one of our non-traditional costs that you might see us funding is food, but also, we might do museum activities or go to aquarium with our participants, things that are non-traditional healing practices. And then the last one of our big three is our program, Growing Black Futures. With Growing Black Futures, this is our initiative that's about leadership and stewardship and reclaiming our connection to the land. Idaho is known for its beautiful outdoors, but many Black people in the state feel a disconnect from it that's rooted in historical violence and systemic exclusion. The most impacted by the climate crisis and environmental justice are often Black, Brown, Indigenous, queer, and trans communities. And our program brings together partners like the Sierra Club, Global Gardens, and Indigenous Idaho Alliance to build leadership among Black, trans, queer folks, ensuring that we have a stake in the movement for environmental justice. And a little fact about Growing Black Futures is that though we refer to it as a leadership program, we don't have a cookie cutter way for making these leaders or like instilling in them this sense of professionalism. Instead, our program directors really work with the participants to already instill and validate the vast knowledge that they already have and to uplift them. But yeah, that was our big three. Along with our big three, we do have other responsive programs. One is Reclaiming Wellness, and that's a program that we use to cover the full therapy costs for Black trans people. And with that, we cover the cost of therapy and therapeutic practices, and we meet with counselors and have our participants meet with counselors to build a network of culturally competent, trans-affirming providers and trauma-informed spaces for our community to be. And yeah, I think that was our big three and a little bit more of the work we do. And at BLC, just in closing, we know that community is our most powerful tool. And through programs like our Black Power program, Journey, and Growing Black Futures, we connect Black trans people with resources, leadership opportunities, and work on our community building. So thank y'all.
Thank you so much, Paradise, for sharing particularly information, with the transgender community that we all need to do such a deep, better job. And not just understanding, but also being involved, right? And being the allies that we can be. So thank you for that. And I hope everyone else can appreciate what you shared with us. And with that, next on our journey tour is the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. Please join me in welcoming their Executive Director, T. Michael Trim. It's on you, T.
Thank you, Levon. For me, the T is ironically silent, so it's just Michael. Next slide, please. So our organization's leadership consists of myself as executive director, our director of education, Adrian Lawyer, and our director of operations, Eric Wolf. All of our contact information is there. Next slide. So we are a nonprofit organization, community-based, community serving, led by transgender people and serving transgender people, founded back in 2007. And it's our goal to provide advocacy, education, and direct services and support of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people and their families throughout the state of New Mexico, and truthfully, the surrounding areas as well. Next slide, please. So under our direct services umbrella, here are a couple of the direct services as they are named. As a note, our physical locations are located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is the central part of the state. However, we serve the entire state. So anything with an asterisk next to it are all items that are available regardless of where an individual lives. In the state of New Mexico, they can be provided virtually, digitally, etc. So that includes assistance with legal name changes, identity document updates, case navigation, which includes emergency financial assistance, very similar to what Paradise was talking about, putting money in the hands of folks, paying bills, etc. Counseling, we have a licensed mental health professional as part of our team. We also host an online provider directory, and that directory lives on our website, which Brecken put in the chat, and folks can go online and look for a affirming provider of their choice, and it's wiki style, so you can search based on your location, the type of provider, etc. And that directory gets updated usually anywhere from 1 to 2 times a year in terms of us going through all of those folks that are listed and getting updates from them. Do you still want to be on the directory? Any updates to the services they provide, etc. We also do lots and lots of gender affirming garments and items, from prosthetics to binders to undergarments, you name it, we've got it and provide it for folks. Additionally, our harm reduction service program, this is the only program that we have that's actually open to folks of any gender, so not just folks underneath the transgender umbrella. And this includes HIV and rapid HIV and syphilis testing, but it also includes syringe exchange services programming. It includes overdose prevention education. It includes safer use kits for folks. And of course, tons and tons of hygiene items and clothing that's given out. And then lastly, on this particular slide about direct services is our Inside Advocacy program. So that's our support for trans folks who are living in places of confinement like prisons, jails, and other correctional facilities. Something of note is that all of our direct services, so anything that we're providing to trans people, are all free, for real free, not weird sliding scale, prove that you're poor free, but just regular free. We also pride ourselves in being a low to no barrier organization where folks are not required to fill out documentation or even provide legal names in order to access these services. Next slide, please. Right. New to our direct services, this program is my baby, so that's why it gets its own slide. This is our brand new transitional housing program named Casa Lola. So for the first time ever, as of January 29th of this year, we opened our very own transitional living program and facility in a space that we own, for trans people by trans people. This is a communal living space with up to 6 beds, where folks who are experiencing homelessness or other housing instability can come and be in a safer, affirming space for up to 18 months while they are navigating what it means to have and find and obtain more stable housing for themselves. Again, another low to no barrier type program where folks are not required to maintain sobriety or even abstinence from substances. Folks can refer themselves versus having to have a referral from another organization. We don't have a curfew or overnight staff. This really is a space that is for folks to be and to gain back some of their autonomy and ability to make choice. But there is also wraparound services available, including a dedicated housing case navigator for all the folks in this program and resident assistants who do some basic life skills programming, help folks prepare meals, and our additional support for the individuals that are in this program. And again, like all of our direct services, Casa Lola is free for folks participating. Next slide, please. Our peer support groups. So these are social support groups that are available, again, for free for folks who are interested. So we have some of our kind of flagship groups that tend to be larger or more robust, meaning our transmasculine group or our transfeminine group. We also have our non-binary group, which is huge as well. But we also have some more niche groups as well, like our partners group, which is for cisgender partners of trans folks. I always have to warn folks that it's not a dating group, like you have to have a partner to come to partners group, but it's a space specifically for folks who are trans attracted, who are in partnerships with trans people to gather support for themselves as well. We also have our youth group, our play group, which is for kiddos 12 and under, our parents and family support group. That's also another huge group that's available. And then lastly, our DD waiver group. This is for trans folks who are also living with developmental disabilities. So that's another one of those niche groups where folks are experiencing multiple identities and wanted a safer space to meet and be together. Most of these groups meet in person and virtually, but it really also depends on the needs and desires of the attendees. Again, direct service, which means free. Next slide. Okay. Our community drop-in center is another extension of the direct services that we have. So all of those things that we listed on 2 or 3 slides ago are available, plus these pieces here. So shower and laundry access, mail services. Again, so many of the folks that visit us in our community drop-in center are experiencing homelessness or housing instability, or just don't have a safe place to receive mail. So that's an additional service that we provide for free. We have our clothing closet, lending library, computer lab, and then we work with other individuals to come in, other individuals and other organizations to come in and provide services like free massage therapy, legal advice from New Mexico Legal Aid, medical care from Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless, and hepatitis C testing from Southwest Care. All of these services, once again, direct service, so they are free. Next slide. Right. So we talked about the direct service piece, and our direct services are often informed, one, by the folks that we're immediately serving, but also by our advocacy work. So we do individualized advocacy one-on-one with individuals or with small family units and groups, but we also do larger scale community advocacy. And that includes policy, like working with Albuquerque Public Schools to help them write their first policy for trans students in their care, and then staying with them over the past 10 plus years as that policy grows to more closely align with the students that it's seeking to serve. And then we also do some legislative work. Most recently last year, working with a good group of our allies and accomplices within the community, including Equality New Mexico, to have the name change statutes updated statewide. So we were successful with the Name Change Modernization Act, which removed the publication requirement at the state level for name changes in the state of New Mexico. So up until July 1st of last year, you had to publicize your name change in the newspaper for a minimum of 2 weeks just to change your name. Well, that was problematic for lots of reasons, and especially also for trans folks, as a lot of those publications also go online. So we worked really hard to get that repealed. Next slide, please. And lastly, education and training. So we offer trainings and seminars to talk about transgender lives, issues for any group. We like to say a group of 5 or more, and we will come and train you. Our kind of flagship training is our Transgender Cultural Fluency, which used to be Transgender 101, but we also offer lots of other trainings, including one specifically around pronouns and gender neutral language. We can also tailor a training specifically around the type of organization or group we are meeting with. Next slide. And that is quote unquote it for our organization. We know that transgender people are more likely to have negative outcomes in their life, which include suffering from and surviving intimate partner violence, domestic violence, assault, etc. So our organization is here to uplift, empower, and work with transgender folks who may or may not be navigating those circumstances currently, or folks who have navigated this in the past and need some additional support.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. I really appreciate as well all of the awesome, what I call holistic services that your program provides to your community. So thank you so very much for enlightening us on understanding. I appreciate that. And as we move forward in our gallery, so as we said, this is a gallery tour, and that is what we are doing, the tour. And with that tour, our next presenter is, I'm always trying to get the language right, Enlace Comunitario Youth Leaders of New Mexico. So Maribel, please forgive me and correct me, but I'm being very intentional of trying to get my Spanish tongue, to roll. but it's not rolling, Maribel. It's
You
not.
roll those R's.
I know it's about the R's. When I had Spanish class, I know it's the R's. So when you come in, Maribel, please say it. But I really been trying to be intentional. So thank you, Maribel, for giving me grace. So with
No problem. No
that,
problem at all. Thank you very much for the introduction.
thank you, Maribel.
Before I move on, I have to say thank you for the space and everyone sharing all this information. It's amazing. It's beautiful to see faces, names that represent me, that can look like me, that we have a lot of similar struggles, and to be in 2024 and be in a space where there's so many more resources for our community in different languages, and to be able to express who we are, if it's around pronunciation of our names, of our agencies, of all of this, it's amazing and it's beautiful. It's opening just a whole part of the world that I think some of us weren't aware in so many ways. So again, my name is Maribel Garza, rolling those R's. And our agency name in who I'm going to speak of and representing here, it's Enlace Comunitario. So just for practice, say that 10 times, one right after another. Enlace Comunitario, and the translation of it is community link. So Enlace Comunitario, our mission is to transform the lives of individuals and their families who are going through domestic violence and working to decrease gender inequity and intimate partner violence in central New Mexico Latinx immigrant communities. So Enlace Comunitario, community link, it just refers back to connecting our community that we serve, survivors of domestic violence, with the resources that already exist in our community. So it's just linking them to all those resources and empowering them, and them leading the way on what's needed and how the services should, sometimes there's a lot of barriers. And so our community are our eyes and ears in making those connections with our community. So thank you again for the space. And again, Maribel Garza with Enlace Comunitario. Next slide, please. So Enlace, again, was founded in 2000. So it's been a couple of years that we've been around. And we, in response to the lack of culturally specific services for Latinx and immigrant communities, that's where Enlace Comunitario came. And it's been 24 going into 25 years. And so our intervention services are culturally and linguistically specific, trauma informed. So very specific in Spanish. And so we also have the other piece of prevention focused community education, outreach, policy advocacy, and collaboration with community partners. So Enlace, I think, does a lot. And over the years, through our community, we have gained trust from our community with all these barriers and mistrust of just a lot of community that have just picked up over the years because of the political climate, not trusting those people or positions in power. So Enlace over the years have gained a lot of trust to our community. And that's really good, because when we talk about families that are going through domestic violence and added barriers of language and not understanding or knowing our justice system, our legal system, it can be very intimidating. So again, next slide. We try to serve our community as much as we can, them being the leaders in what they need in order to serve them accordingly and appropriately. I'm going to focus more on our prevention department. And so our prevention department has 4 programs. And all of the programs are at levels through leadership development, training, education, outreach to promote equitable gender affirming practices among parents, youth, and their extended community. So even though we provide services, the intervention, if we really want to get to the root of the problem, we have to talk about gender inequality, and we have to bring this education and outreach and promote equity and gender affirming practices, not just amongst adults, but through youth and even through life skill classes for our children. When we have prevention classes out in the community, we also provide parallel classes to the children, starting from 5 all the way up to 12. So if we really want to get down deep into start to stir things and turning those wheels and start having conversations and spaces around these topics, we have to go all across and with everyone, right? And what better way to do this than with the help of our community? So that next slide, please. I have to talk about our Youth Leaders Program, which that's part of the reason why we're here. Here's a picture of our cohort that just finished their year commitment in August, a group of 14 youth. Next slide, please. And so these youth are youth leaders, they're witnesses or survivors of DV who have previously received Enlace Comunitario services. So our Youth Leaders Program is designed for youth between the ages of 13 to 17, who are ideal teens who are interested in building their leadership and presentation skills. I have to say, the Youth Leaders Program and Enlace Comunitario is my baby. I have learned so much through these, through the community and through these youth leaders. A lot. I never in my mind even thought of working in this field of domestic violence. Never even imagined that I would specifically work with youth in any way. So this experience has been wonderful to me. And our Youth Leaders Program make that positive impact in their communities by reducing violence, fostering healthy gender inclusive relationships through these programs. I could say so much, and I wish I had more time to talk specifically about the program and all the areas, but I do want to mention that these youth enter this program voluntarily. They are in no way forced by their parents. They're no way manipulated or anything like that. That's what I love about this group, that they're referred from our intervention program, and it could be something as like within a couple of months, or it could be youth where they have been through our intervention programs a couple of years back and they hear about the opportunity to be able to commit to this program, apply for it, have an interview and get selected to be part of this program. And so they are committed youth, and more than anything, they themselves have been survivors, witnesses of DV. So they're really committed in starting to change, breaking that cycle. Next slide, please. So these are some of the topics that are included in the training that they commit to for a whole year from September to August, with the total hours of 55. Again, these kids are committed when they start the program in September from the training all the way until August. It's rare that I ever have a youth that drops. And if they ever do, it's for reasons that are out of their control. So these are the topics that they that they gain training, some of the many that they gain training on. Next slide, please. And so the program for the whole year consists of those trainings that I mentioned, bi-weekly meetings. They also present to their peers at schools, events, community centers, wherever there's a group of youth between the ages of 13 to 17, 18, even up to, university young adults. They will present on the topics that were mentioned before. They participate in community events. They have to maintain, of course, be enrolled in school, and they are provided incentives. It's a lot of work. The training, preparing, presenting. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you understand the work that it takes to do this prevention education work. So these teams are amazing. Have I said that yet? They're amazing, and they're the ones that facilitate and prepare for these presentations among the peers. Next slide, please. So the impact that they have amongst their peers is amazing. Again, they are coming from a space of been there, done that. And so what better way to bring awareness around these topics than to have youth talk about healthy relating, the effects that witnessing domestic violence has on them, how they can change these attitudes, these words, how to bring about this education to their peers. I call them walking resources. So youth are not likely to come to adults. We are there to, best serve them, but youth are not likely to come to adults, but they will come to another teen. So what better way to have them equipped and prepared with all the resources, all the information around healthy relating and red flags and whatnot than our youth, and start changing some of those social norms. So this is just the celebration that we had in August with our current most recent cohort that just graduated. And right now we have a new cohort of 13 youth that will finish one of their many trainings this Saturday. Next slide, please. So again, that's our Youth Leaders Program, really fast. But if anyone has any questions or comments, of course, these are a way to contact, and you can reach and see more about our programs at enlacenm.org. You can follow us on Instagram, EnlaceNM. Thank you very much. Again, for the space and the time. Thank you, Lavon.
Thank you, Maribel. And I am so thankful for the grace that you gave me, and just thankful to be able to be transparent, right? Opposed to us always trying to fake it, right? And so I just thank you for that. And I hope others in the space will, being a facilitator is not an easy job, though I've done it for almost 30 years. And as I absolutely love being a facilitator, it is my playground. So just thank you when I don't always get it right, but you all still, work with me, support me, and give me that grace. I'm really appreciative. But most of all, Maribel, wow, I love the program. I want to come out there. I want to come out there, and the amount of amazings that you gave the program and the youth. Thank you for that. I really appreciate hearing that passion and that energy, come through. So thank you once again. And as we move forward, guys, right? Next up, we are pleased to welcome Nathana Bird, the Interim Executive Director of Tewa Women United. And again, Nathana, I'm working on your name. I love the name. And so if you need to repronounce it, go by all means, do so. But thank you and welcome to the space.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathana Bird. I serve as the Interim Executive Director here with Tewa Women United. And so you can go to the next slide. I just also want to say thank you for allowing us to share the work that we have been doing for years here in northern New Mexico. So I'll tell you a little bit about Tewa Women United. Part of our vision, part of our mission is really to be grounded in our cultural values of who we are as Tewa people. And so in our mission, it's really about being rooted in our breath of life, which we call our Bingha, and also our Bingna. And so we're blessed that we have elders who co-created the organization years ago that have really infused our work with Tewa values and Tewa perspectives of our Indigenous lifeways of how we guide our work, how we're rooted in community, and really providing us guidance as we also become the next generation. And so you can go to the next slide. So the next slide is really about our work. We are an organization that was started in 1989 as a support group here in northern New Mexico for women in our community to really address issues around colonization, religious inquisition, militarization, and also taking on different types of issues that were present in our community at the time. And so a lot of the work that began the story of Tewa Women United was really rooted in issues around environmental justice, reproductive justice, and now gender justice. And so part of our work is really to create space for people in our communities, women in our communities, to have a space to confront some of these ideas, and also to create solutions that sustain our communities and sustain our families. Next slide, please. And as I said before, some of the work that was done at the really the forefront of how Tewa Women United was to be guided in our values, to be rooted in who we are as Tewa people. As Pueblo people here, we have certain values that we live by that really shape who we are. And so these are some of the values that I'll go through. And so I'll say them in our native language and also just the translation of what they could be translated to in Tewa, in English. And just knowing that these values are guided by Tewa Women United's work. And so each Pueblo has their own sort of perspective on how these are translated. But the first one is Atgin. So it's really about respect to self and others. Winetaye, which is together we live these values. Singemave'i, which is loving, caring for each others. Huiwa Sengwa Vitu, which is male and female energy, and the ancestral knowingness within each of us. Nango Chukuyo, which is our mother earth and the multiversity. And Bingma Betty, which is the concept of letting go. And then the next one is Wawatsi, which is our breath, our prayer, our commitment to live life with purpose and good intentions. So this particular framework, each of our programs is really rooted in how our values play out and how we're showing up in the world, how we're doing this work. And so I feel like that's one of the deeply embedded aspects of the work that we do here at Tewa Women United, is knowing that we're guided by these values, right? That we're moving through life, that we're moving through our work, sort of as bumpers, right? So we're sort of like moving through our work, guided by these values that our ancestors and our grandmothers and our elders put forward to us, in how we continue to do our work. Next slide, please. And so I'll take you through a little bit about our programs. We have 3 programs that are actively doing work in communities in different ways. A lot of it is grounded in this concept of protecting land, air, water, and our Mother Earth, and also preventing violence against women, girls, and Mother Earth as well. And so part of the beginning work of Tewa Women United started by environmental justice work. We're deeply connected to our land here in northern New Mexico, and we're also in close proximity to Los Alamos National Laboratory, which has been sort of like an elephant in the room for most of our communities who are here in northern New Mexico. And so part of our environmental justice work is really to address issues around nuclear contamination, around having clean air, clean water, clean land, and having access to that. So the environmental justice program has a variety of different types of programs that they're doing that are focused on restoring food and seed sovereignty connections, around EJ advocacy. We have Pueblo women farming groups. We also have revamped a whole entire slope in our park here in Espanola, and we installed the edible foods garden. So we've grown this edible foods garden for years, which is known as the Espanola Healing Foods Oasis, which we revamped the whole entire slope from a grassy slope into planting native seeds, native plants that can be used for medicinal purposes, fruit trees. And this has been a whole investment in our community, so that community can get connected back to the land, back to harvesting, back to herbal medicine. And from that, we also developed the Espanola Healing Foods Oasis Seed Library, which is also a way to allow folks to exchange seeds, non-GMO seeds that they can also use in their own gardens. And so they're able to go into the Espanola Public Library and check out seeds, and then also return seeds. And so this is part of a way to connect community back to reclaiming the land, to coming back to knowing sort of what are the traditional practices that our ancestors did for years around growing. We also have a Remedios program as well, where we harvested some of the herbs there, right? We also harvested some of the plants that we grow, and we create remedios. And so this was a project that just recently started. And so we're trying to tap into how do we utilize the teachings of our ancestors of the land to create wellness for our communities in those times of stress, in those times of just mental overload, and those times of trauma. Like, how do we provide these sorts of tools to community to create their own medicine from the earth? And then the other piece around the EJ work is the EJ advocacy. So we do a lot of policy, research, outreach, and networking around environmental justice and nuclear contamination and those types of things. And then also connecting how reproductive justice and environmental justice are also linked to this whole entire big picture of the nuclear industrial complex here in our area and across the nation as well. So next slide. So our next program is our reproductive justice program. This was one of the second programs that was created through Tewa Women United after seeing the injustice that is done to our land and how it affects our bodies. Our reproductive justice program was really there to help survivors of violence reconnect back to who they are as they give birth, as they become parents. And so through that, our doula program was created to provide support to our families and parents as they're going through birth to reconnect back to themselves. So as we did our work understanding how violence impacts our land and how it impacts ourselves, as we go through these traumas, we also started to see that parents needed support, right? So if you're a survivor of sexual violence, sometimes it's hard to really connect to becoming a parent or to breastfeeding or different types of things as you begin to parent. And so we wanted to create a program where we could support folks spiritually, culturally, and mentally and emotionally to help them through the process of becoming a mom, becoming a parent, and also giving birth, and also postpartum. And so through our reproductive justice program, we have a variety of program projects that we also offer. Each of our programs are super busy and super full. So through the reproductive justice program, they offer doula services to parents and families here in northern New Mexico. We have doulas that are contracted in our community, and we also train doulas. So every so often we have trainings. Now it just started now in September. We have a cohort of 10 doulas, some of who are Indigenous and also who are non-Indigenous here in our communities, who feel the calling for becoming a doula and want to support families in this next phase of life. And so that's one aspect, is a doula program, which offers the services and then also the training. The other piece that we do is also offering family support services, which are parent circles, prenatal support groups, and also now postpartum mental health support. And so this is for all families who want to come in. We have different types of workshops that are happening. We also have prenatal yoga as well that is happening here in our campus and also in another health center in Espanola Valley. We're also doing policy work and trying to really get a feel for how our community feels about reproductive justice issues. Our program really spans from everything from birth to abortion and everything in between, and supporting folks that have also experienced miscarriages and those types of things. And so our whole entire reproductive justice program serves the whole lifespan of folks in our community. The other piece that we do is really around health and equity policy building and support. And so we're connected with different types of coalitions and networks across the state and also regionally and throughout the nation around impacts on reproductive justice, anything ranging from abortion to doulas to Medicaid reimbursements. And so we have a whole spectrum of things that we advocate for and support as we do this work. And through the RJ program, another piece is we do a lot of community engagement. So we're trying to get going now a community closet. So folks can come in and pick up any items they may need for their families, for their babies, diaper drives, food drives, toy drives, all of those things as well. So that's the reproductive justice program. We can go to the next slide. And so the next slide is our gender and generational healing justice program. So this is really a program that is intergenerational, I would say. And this is where we do a lot of our prevention programming. As we built our programs up from environmental justice to reproductive justice, we started to see the need for how do we prevent these issues that are coming up in our community. We did a lot of sexual assault direct services, working with survivors of sexual assault families and young people as well. And so we started to see started to question really, how do we prevent these things from happening, right? So we have really invested a lot into curriculum building around prevention programming that is culturally based within our Tewa values. So the values that I showed you earlier, that work really guided all of our development of our curriculum. So we have 2 curriculums through the Generational Healing Justice Program, which is one a comprehensive sexual education curricula, and then the other one is a healthy masculinities curricula and a gender-based violence curricula. We've partnered with numerous folks to create curricula that can be used in our communities to help us prevent things from happening around gender-based violence. And also the Gender Justice Program is really about prevention education, youth leaders development, community engagement, and then also this is where our Circle of Grandmothers, the co-creators of Tewa Women United, this is the program that they sit under. And so they're working with our program to infuse all of the knowledge that they have into the work that becomes the prevention work. And so our grandmothers are also holding healing circles, and they have developed some stories, video stories of folks' narratives to share with the young people, to offer advice and give them guidance as they're going through their life as well. They're doing full moon ceremonies, and they're also doing work in the community in those times where we need elders to show up. They're there and they're providing prayers, they're providing meal baskets, they're providing any sort of spiritual guidance as we go through the things that may come up in our lives. And so our gender justice program had went through its own transition, right, as we started to see the work and how prevention sort of plays out. And so this is where we're now exploring sort of what does intergenerational prevention work look like for us. And so there's a lot of youth council and youth leaders development pieces happening there. And then there's also the pieces around how do we engage young men in this work? How do we engage men and other folks in our communities to support the prevention of gender-based violence? And then also working with our grandmothers to give us guidance as we move through the work. And so this is a fairly new iteration of some of the work we've done, but it's definitely has created a new approach to how we integrate young voices and also elder voices into the work to guide us moving forward. And so it's been really amazing to see. Next slide, please. I think that might be it. So this is pretty much all the programs. We have our reproductive justice program, our environmental justice program, and our generational and gender healing justice program. You can scan the QR code if you like to follow our newsletter. We have a newsletter that comes out every month. Our Facebook and our Instagram and our website are pretty active. And so if you want to give us a follow, go ahead and hit the follow button. But thank you all so much for your time. Thank you all for this opportunity to share our work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nathania. This was so enlightening. Wow, all the programs have given such great, valuable information and solutions to the way you all have created the resources to fit your communities. So thank you all so much for that. I I'm so impressed, and I'm inspired, by it all. And so with that, we now will have a chance to hear from all of our speakers together for a panel discussion. It should be really great. I know it will be great. I'm pleased to turn the floor over to Nish Newton, who will moderate our panel. Nish is an organizer with the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence and gender doula with the Black Liberation Collective in Idaho. So we thank you, and really look forward to you moderating this panel. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lavon. And I'm witnessing our panelists come all together. I want to first begin by introducing myself again into this space. My name is Nish. I use they and them pronouns. And I'm here today to weave together some of our brilliant organizers' ideas and approaches and goals. So I'm going to utilize this time to incorporate as many questions and discussions as possible. But I also want to offer an invitation to folks, especially our event guests, that this is a great time to go ahead and get some more water, to go ahead and get a new sheet of notes out, because I'm hopeful that this part of the conversation will be really fruitful. I think that I've been creating notes along the way of different parts of your presentations I wanted to come back to, but I really just want to follow what's in my gut right now. And the thing that's really loudest in my gut is that through all of the presentations that y'all have shared, I was just floored. I was inspired. I wanted to replicate that in my community. Some of it felt familiar to parts of like my community and the organizing that I've witnessed so far. And one of the very first voices that was coming up as I was getting excited and inspired was like, we need to have a bigger platform for this work, or we need to get more resources so that we can like sustain this and grow this work. But a lot of that is just like a voice that's really, really systems based. And then I start to think about the bigger picture, like, all right, so we get some institutional platform, or like we get some more sustained funding from like a system that allows us to do this. But suddenly, now the food that we wanted to provide isn't covered for funding, or now the resources that we want to provide to folks, there has to be somebody to be there overnight to monitor the perimeter or to monitor the premises. And just so much of the organic community work we want to do suddenly goes out the window. So I feel like my very first question is just kind of this tension I'm feeling within myself about the systems and how some of the time these institutions are here under the guise of support and sustaining us and amplifying us. But then sometimes those very same systems are the things that pull our power or that have caused our disempowerment in the first place. So my first question for y'all is more about, where do you find yourself in this dance or in this tension with systems and community-based work? And I know that's such a loaded question. But if you're feeling called to it, Maribel, I'll start with you and then just pass it to our other panelists. I would love to know more about how you personally or your work with Enlace just really finds itself in the rhythm of navigating these systems, but also knowing that these systems aren't the end all be all for our liberation.
Yes, thank you. So many things come to mind. But specifically with our youth leaders program, you mentioned food, space. Some of the monies that's available come with certain challenges, or sometimes, for instance, I'm just going to put this out here because of the community we serve. There's a lot around, their name, social security number, and identifying number. So that is like the very first ground part where our agency does not require in any way for anyone to have to disclose whether they're here documented or undocumented, whether they have Medicaid or Medicare, if they qualify for it or not. So some of the monies that's available, whether it's for intervention or prevention, right off the bat, that's a requirement where, you know, you have to provide, you have to one way or another identify if the population that you're serving is here with documents, a resident, a US citizen. And so then that just kind of puts a big red flag around the community that we're trying to serve. And so we have to build on trust and communication and transparency. And so when that's already something that's out in the air of, you know, should we tailor our services based on what these grants want, or are saying, this is how you should do your services, then it's not client-led. Then we're not serving the community. Then we're not putting an emphasis on the needs of what that community needs in the moment. So for instance, our youth, in times, I mean, a way to come together with the Latino community, and I hear with a lot of other communities, is food. It's food, and barriers are places, transportation, the accessibility to food. Some of these youth and some of these kids want to be involved, but sometimes their parents are working full time and they don't have transportation. So the youth very much want to be involved, but then we don't have the bandwidth, the staff to go pick up the youth, to bring them. I mean, how much resources is involved in that, right? Renting a car, or even our own personal cars. I'm gonna just say that if a youth says, Maribel, I can't make it to the meeting or to the training, oh, believe me, if this kid wants to be there and their family wants them to be there, I will figure it out of how to get them to our space or wherever that is for them to participate. So sometimes these challenges are real, and we have to even advocate in a different area, in a different place, where sometimes our community doesn't even have an idea how this advocacy happens behind the curtains, in terms of saying no to some funding because of what they're asking. And it's not going to happen. It's not what our community needs. And then some of those funding that are just amazing and very flexible and says, this is what's here. How do you all want to use this? What we've seen, the outcome, we've seen how can we tailor this to the needs of your youth or your programs or your training? How can we make use of this? So there's a little bit of the extremes, and then there's a lot of in the middle. So yeah, the challenges I think are always going to be there. It's just being creative of how we can access them. And some of them are a total no, and then some are just super flexible. So
I should have really warmed up my neck before this event, because I'm just sitting here enthusiastically nodding to everything you're saying. And it just feels so aligned to a lot of the tension points that we find ourselves in. Like, the systems that we navigate are very, very, they're like bureaucracies, and there's a lot of system, and you have to find your way through all of these complex parts. And like you said, with food, a lot of the time systems or funding that comes from institutions, they want to have proof of the last time a food vendor was charged a similar rate. For us in community, we don't necessarily have that. We have like the past 4 generations this auntie has provided for us. Or for transportation, sometimes the systems or the ways that things have been bureaucratized are now like, you need to have an ID on file, and then we have to give you a per diem for gas per mile. And I'm like, yes, and the community member just texted me 5 minutes ago they need a ride. That's within my capacity. We're in community with one another. This is an ask I can live into. So I'm thankful for you mentioning some of those tension points. And I'm curious for some of the other folks, some of the other organizers in this space, what else is coming up for you? What else are some of the tension points that you're finding yourselves in that maybe we can learn from, or maybe some of the shared experiences that we all navigate?
I'll just jump in and additionally say that yes, and with everything that Maribel said, that our 501c3 organizations will not save us, period, right? These orgs are social workers will not save us. Sorry, social workers that are on the call, you won't save us. Reality check, right? We save ourselves, we protect ourselves, we care for ourselves together in community. And we can utilize some of these systems to our advantage, but they're still part of a system that is designed to keep people that look like a lot of us on this call right now exactly where we're at, stuck. So we have to utilize these spaces to break down those barriers and to dismantle the systems that are here to harm us, or at the very least, here to keep us out of these positions of power and thriving and abundance, to move towards our rightful spaces, which are joy and liberation and freedom and abundance and healing, right? And very much so +1 to Maribel and talking about saying no to funding that hurts our communities and saying no to funding that doesn't allow us to serve our communities in a meaningful, thoughtful, healing way. And really, additionally, the last piece is moving from a scarcity mindset to a mindset of abundance. There is money there. It's our job to go get it, but it's also our job to go get it in a way that is thoughtful about those that we serve and in a way that continues to have integrity about who we are and what we do. But the resources are there. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, but they are there. So instead of us falling into an oppressive scarcity mindset that keeps us at each other instead of working together, if we were to have a mindset of abundance.
Speak that, Michael. The chat, the way that it went off, the way our collective nods. I'm just thankful for we're all on Zoom, because it would just be all of us in space being like, the entire time you talked in agreement. Nathana, I saw you kind of do some claps as Michael was talking. I saw you nod your head quite a bit. What's coming up for you in your spirit when we're talking about these tension points of what we're told about the system and how the system is supposed to support us, but the just different ways that we move as community organizers?
Yeah, I agree with access to transportation and access to food and providing that and the limitations there, and then also how this system isn't gonna save us, right? I've really been thinking, so I'm new in my role as an interim executive director. I've been associate director before and ran programming for years. And so I'm starting to learn the other side of how the system operates, right? And so for me, one of the questions has come up is really like, how is this sustainable? And how do you really create organization that is sustainable and not dependent upon funding that could immediately get cut, and then you don't have the means to continue to provide employment for community members and also to provide stipends to participants that are coming into your program. And so for me, I always go back to a reminder that Kathy Sanchez, who is one of the co-creators of Tewa United, reminds us of every single time is that same concept of abundance, right? And how do you start to understand that money abundance is sort of like a river, and it sort of flows and it comes and it goes, and you have that moment of like coming in and coming out. And so I always have to remind myself that there's those moments where it may seem like it's scarce, or it may seem like we're coming up against different types of things, and this changes with the political landscape as well, right? And so how we get access to these funds shifts and changes. And also there's folks out there in our communities who do have access to money, who do have access to capital. And so how are we creating those relationships to also support our work, or find those champions, as they say, right, to really help guide our work or invest in our work, so that we can create those things and find those allies. And so sometimes I get into this moment of like, oh, how is this all going to work? And how is it going to find itself? And how are we going to secure all these things? And then I have to remind myself that it is like this current, right? It's like this flow. And then I also just want to like touch on the point of like not being swayed by funders that sort of pull you away from your values. That is such a huge thing, because we have a lot of folks who are investing into nonprofit work and into our communities, and we have to stay rooted in our values of who we are and the organizations that we serve, to not be swayed away from those values or really pulled away from those ideas of the intentionality of why we started our work. And so I always remind myself and try to go back to like that core part of why Tewa Women United was started, and how do I stay connected to that concept of that seed that was planted, right? That seed that was planted in 1989 for us. Like, how do I make sure that I don't sway away from that, and I'm tethered and really like solid in who I am as a leader in this organization, to ensure that we're sustainable and ensure that we're continuing for generations, so that my children or my children's children can continue to use the services that we provide, right? And so I'm sometimes I think beyond 5 years when we do strategic plan, but also I think about the impact that when I started this work 10 years ago, as an actual staff member, the impact that that work had 10 years ago for a young person who is now, what, maybe 24 years old, right? And so how are the decisions that I'm making as a leader now impacting the future generations to come? And knowing that I have to stay rooted in my values of who I am as a leader here in this work.
Yeah, we have one more idea from Michael, it looks like.
Sorry, there was something that Nathana said that just really struck me that I forgot to say, which is
Please.
that, like, yes, I want our organizations to be sustainable, and I want our organizations to not be necessary. I want us to not need these spaces. I want someday for our physical spaces to become like on a historical, like when you take those historical tours and you go by and be like, and here's the old headquarters of Tewa Women United when we didn't treat Indigenous people right, but we're better now, and that's empty, but this serves as a monument, right? Like, that's what I want. Yes, we need to be sustainable until freedom, but I'm actively trying to work myself out of a job.
That part. And I feel like, of course, that's why we're all here together. And of course, that's why we're attracting one another and our work is really interdependent on another. I know that Black Liberation Collective has the same principle, that we're trying to work ourselves out of the job. Yes, we want to be sustained for the next few years until we've proved ourselves irrelevant, and that we've proved ourselves to be in a space of liberation. And I think that some days that feels so much more realistic and attainable than others. And then there's other times where I'm like, ugh, the day we're going to be this monument is not 5 years, not 10 years. It's looking so far out. And I feel on those days, it's the days where the socio-political climate has just felt most stank and most vicious. So one of the things that's really coming up is, at this point, is exactly the waters that we're swimming in and exactly the things that make the challenges emerge for us. And I'm thinking more so in the mountain region, this looks like transphobia, this looks like white supremacy, this looks like settler colonialism. But I know that it's not just that in our region, and I think that we're all proof of that. So my next question is more geared toward our region itself and the days that we live in our communities. I want to know what's distinct about our mountain region. And Paradise, I especially want to start with you this time to figure out what exactly about the landscape around you has made BLC's work really distinct? Or what are some of the ways that the landscape around you informs the funding that you have or informs the programming that you have?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, I don't know if there's any one thing that makes BLC's work really distinct or separate, because it is sounding like we have a lot in common already, the work that we do. But I know in Boise, especially in Idaho, it is a rural state. So one of the things that makes our work a little challenging, but also rewarding, important, and needed is that it can be really isolating there in the state, especially for Black trans people. They we are like the minority just being Black people. I don't know the exact statistic, but I know Black people are less than 1% of the state's total population. And just like dealing with that in that area, it can be hard to get to places, hard to access just resources that aren't community based. So we definitely have like some challenges. And like Maribel was saying, if people do want to participate, I know we've been in this situation as well. If they want to participate and they don't have transportation, you know, we're gonna make it work. We're gonna figure it out. And but I do think that that is something that we have in common.
And so often, like, yes, demographically, there's not a day in Idaho I forget how minoritized we are. Like, there's not a single moment. And there's something about letting that dominant narrative win that mayhaps I'm just too stubborn to accept. Because I know that, like, yes, maybe we don't have numbers, but we have impact and we have presence. And I hate when people describe the state or our region in general, that it's just this sea of white supremacy, bigotry, and that we're just specks in it. And I don't think that's the case. I think we're a lot more than these specks. And I'm curious what other folks are thinking about our region or just some of the narratives that exist about our region.
So I can chime in. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about being born in this space and existing in this space is that this is like a positive note, right? And this is like a positive notion that I tend to hear, but really that like I think in New Mexico, like things are different than they are in the rest of the world. I also traveled to other places and I'm like, oh, there's no place like home. Like for me, there's like the comfort of knowing that we're moving the needle in different types of ways, right? Through policy and through the work that we're doing and being grounded in our culture and like really creating a sense of community and creating family within the work that we're doing. Like I think that it's similar in other places, but something about this area is like where the norm is not the norm. So it's a little bit different for me because I'm trying to, I guess I come from a place of like really knowing that we can't be swayed by these bigger narratives of who we're supposed to be or the expectations that are there because we're so deeply connected to who we are. And so for me as a Native person here in New Mexico, like we're still grounded in who we are culturally. And so that supersedes everything else that exists in the world because we're still connected back to our ancestral teachings of who we are. And so it's kind of hard to describe and yeah, for me, it's just like I'm thankful that I have elders who are still deeply connected to our people and to our sense of place, right? And so I'm not sure if that's the same for everybody in other places. And so for me is like I can go to a certain mountain and I can see that my people existed there and I knew that that was their home. And so for me, it's like that's the part that I'm, as a Indigenous person, I think that's sort of what makes us unique in this way.
Is there anything else that's coming up for y'all that hasn't already been said about our region, or just the way that it's really important for us as a collective to approach the work that we do in our area?
Yeah, I'd like to say that just being able to provide these spaces for our community, whether it's children, youth, adults, survivors of sexual assault, of domestic violence, being able to provide the space in their language, I want to say in my language, in our language, specifically to Latino immigrant community. It's amazing. And how just being a space that you look, you speak, your traditions, your food, you share something so similar, so close, that is who you are. That's where our community can thrive. And so I know there's a lot of, speaking of some stereotypes of our community or our region, and again, I speak in the Latino immigrant community, where there's a stereotype that they're uneducated. They don't know how to live amongst community. They're poor. They just don't know how to live right. And it saddens my heart because that's not true. Unfortunately, all this that has surrounded us one way or another, the struggles, the trauma, all of that stuff, it doesn't take away of who we are and what we bring. And we bring so much. So just to have the space for the youth that have witnessed domestic violence, and for them to share that, where they're at, and the possibilities and the opportunities, and for an agency or a group of people to be able to say, this is the space, what do you need? You're doing something amazing, it's beautiful, let's go out and share it, whether it's the food, and take away all those barriers, the food, the transportation, the language, maybe the lack of, and just provide it. Oh my God. I mean, these kids are amazing. The ideas that they have, the energy that they bring, and they transfer that over to their peers. I love being in the middle of that, because back in my day, in Kansas in the 80s, with, no one looked like me, no one spoke Spanish, there was no ESL, none of that. I was the weird one, and no one went through what I went through, or ate what I ate. So coming into New Mexico, it's amazing. Even my own kids being able to pass that on, in Spanish being their first language. You don't need to speak English. You'll learn it when you learn it. You're in America, you're gonna have to figure it out anyway. But I want you to speak the language. I want you to be surrounded by just who you are, so you can thrive as a young person and just be that change in your community wherever you go in the world. It's amazing.
This feels so same, different to a conversation I was just having with Paradise about the ways that Black Liberation Collective approaches like our application process when we're making our community offerings for mutual aid, or gender affirming care, or growing Black futures. Our application process, we want that to be in a way that makes sense to our community members, because we know that it's important for us to say things in our own way. It's important for us to connect with our people in a meaningful way. And for those of us who, I guess, don't know every working thing about Black Liberation Collective, Paradise, I would love if you could speak more on that. And then I really want to keep going this direction about talking about how our community speaks, and some of the language pieces that fall out the more systemic we become.
I feel like for our application processes, we just focus on being as accessible as possible. So we might have a general way of doing applications, but we make sure people know that if they need to call us, do it over the phone, maybe just DM us. or something a little less traditional, that we're open for that too. And a lot of times we do get community members who, need help with the application, need a little more time, and just remaining flexible and making sure that everybody has access to it in the way that they need to access it. And if they have any questions, knowing that we can answer those, quickly, efficiently, and make sure that they understand that we might not need every detail that they want to give us, or just be willing to work with them. And I feel like when we were talking about it, we were talking about how like not formal our application process is. And we have like a little bit of a mentality like amongst community members. They always feel like we might be doing too much, and we're like, yeah, you should be feeling like you're scamming us a little bit, like scam us. But yeah, I think that, I don't know if that answers that.
It does. And I think that it's just so tough because so often people are like, you didn't ask 47 questions and make them show proof and then have them identify, do an entire census. It's like, no, we just wanted their name. We wanted to know what their need was. And that's how we move in community. And that's a way that is possible. But I know that so often in our application processes, they want to do a lot of formal intake. And then a lot of that formal intake also gets even more and more systemic and just out of route with community. Some of the demographic information I can think of are terms that we don't identify ourselves as. There might be things on there trying to know more about like our identities and experiences, but they're asking, do you have experience with DV or IPV, or acronyms about like domestic violence or intimate partner violence, that even if somebody has experienced that, that's not necessarily the language that they use for it. So I'm curious to know what else is coming up for y'all just about how we speak with our community members, some of the ways or some of the terms that we can go ahead and actually authentically do that, and to continue to push the ways that the system interrupts that away from us.
I love the idea of us always continuing to allow us to identify ourselves in whatever words feel best and most comfortable for us, whether that's in a native tongue, whether that's less politically correct than what's out there in mixed company, but always holding space for folks to self-identify. In the trans community specifically, even words like trans or non-binary have now become so heavily policed and colonized to the point where are those words truly accessible to community members? And if someone identifies in a way that is not using those explicit words, then are those people, quote unquote, part of community? And for us, the answer is yes. Like, we know that trans is an umbrella term, and we also know that lots of folks don't necessarily use that specific word or those specific pieces of language to identify. And they are absolutely part of our gender diverse community. So reminding ourselves to hold space for folks to be exactly who they are at all times.
I love that. Are there any other thoughts or questions before I start to throw out a couple new ideas for our discussion? At this point, I'm gonna welcome the folks who are in our audience to utilize the chat box if there's any other questions or ideas that are coming up. I know that there's one or two more that I want to pose into this space, but I think that this would be a great opportunity if there's any connections or curiosities that you want to lean into together. And while folks are in the chat box doing that, one of the things that has also been coming up for me is really just how our entire town hall was framed. I know that this space has been really curious about how we can do our meaningful work in organizing outside of systems. And it's really been framed over how we've been doing that over the last few years. There's been so many pivots that we've been experiencing since the onset of COVID. I know that there's been a lot of shift to online work, and that came up quite a bit in yesterday's discussion, talking about how so much of our work moved to virtual spaces and some of the strengths and some of the tension points coming up for that. I'm curious to know how y'all's work has shifted in the last few years, or if that's something that is the case. I know a lot of times for Black, brown, queer, trans folks, we're always shifting and adapting our work. It feels like it's always nebulous and adapting. So, how has it been shifting? Or is that something that's really the case? Has it always been shifting? I'd love to know what's coming up for y'all in regards to that curiosity. This time, Nathana, I'm curious what's coming up for you if you feel called to it.
So we shifted a lot in COVID to online. So everything from our curricula to our parent circles to our doula training, everything shifted online. Last summer was the first summer that we had our youth programming back, our summer program. And so there was a huge shift, right? Even bringing young people into the space that hadn't been in summer program for a while. A lot of our communities were just unveiling their summer programs in person. And so there's been a whole lot of shifts and changes for building up participant numbers, and then also the impact on our staff, right? And so organizationally, we've been looking at what does it look like for, I don't even want to say post-COVID, but in this place after sort of the isolation and those types of things, and how it impacts us, even as staff, and how we're coming back into the space. And so I think we've been really trying to sit with all of this, just how it impacts our numbers, how it impacts just our abilities to also go into the schools, because some of us have not been fully back in person. And so we're still trying to figure out all of the whole pieces of like, how do we build participants up to come back into our programming in person? How do we also navigate hybrid spaces? So a lot of us had to learn new tools and provide services online. And so for us, I think it's been a lot of shifting and changing. And then also making sure that we still allow folks to have access to the support that they need as we continue to do our programming. And so we don't want to jump all into one area and not provide access to other folks that may not be able to come in person, but how do we provide this as a hybrid for folks? So that's been a whole kind of shifting and changing for us as we navigate just this whole change to our system and how we provide services.
Because it has been many abrupt changes that just suddenly one day this arrived, and we don't necessarily want to suddenly shift back into in-person spaces and to just have it be as jarring as it was as we entered this. Thank you for sharing that. What else is coming up for other folks? What things have been shifting for you in the past few years? And what are some of the strategies that have been really powerful for you within those shifts? Or perhaps has anything shifted? Maybe that might be a better question.
I can speak towards one of the shifts at BLC. And I think that this always existed in some capacity, but more since COVID, one of our shifts is just focusing on wellness. I think before, even if you were sick, COVID or not, there's like a big drive for you to show up anyway, even to the point of burnout. And that's one of the things that we always have at our forefront at BLC is just focusing on your wellness, so that when you show up in spaces, you can show up and be, you know, your whole self. And also, even at our in-person events, it's definitely something that we encourage people to, you know, not show up if you're not well, or have COVID options to, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I definitely think that that's a shift that we lean into, is just focusing on our health and our wellness to make sure that we can show up the way we want to.
Thank you, thank you. What else is coming up?
I agree with Paradise. Like just thinking, there's been a lot of shifts, a lot of changing in terms of how we provide the services. Speaking of domestic violence, intervention, prevention, and what just came up for me right away, and then Paradise mentioned about self-care. It's the staff, I think, is intervention in providing services. There's already that vicarious trauma, and then with COVID. And so if some of us that work in the field have mental health, have health issues, whatever may be in our life, it was like, wow, how we tend to take care of others and not of ourselves. And I think there was a really big stretch, and there had to be a change in terms of internally in how staff is taken care of, because some of these services that are provided, I mean, we do as much as we can in prevention, but I mean, it just exploded, right? And so the services and everything, it's almost like we had to continue to provide services. People were not safe. So trying to come up in internally of how to keep our families safe, our kids, what can we offer, what's available, what, it's like, it was a lot. So I know that staff was really stressed. And so being able to just start, you know, working from home. At one point, it was not an option. And if you have a car, and if there's any way and you're fine, you need to be at work. There's services that we need to provide. And so, wow, the way that shifted. And so now currently at Enlace Comunitario staff, we have 2 days that we work from home. You can choose for Fridays, everyone works from home, and any other day from Monday through Thursday, you can choose another day to work from home. Options that our clients, or the way we meet, through Zoom. If you have transportation, or maybe you're not feeling too good, you may be under the weather, but hey, you could still continue to work. Don't stretch it. But, you know, working from home and having that Zoom meeting, it could work too. So I think options, a lot of more options came up. And so that's just internally with staff. And so trying to provide that same, that offer the same options for our prevention programs, or even our clients, was really big too. So yeah, self-care definitely.
I love all of the things that you say, because how are we supposed to do restorative justice work without restoring ourselves? And I think that there have been many, many shifts that folks across the board have provided to staff or their lead organizers that really allow for more of that restorative nature to come through. Because traditionally, systemically, professionally, a lot of the structures that exist are, you get a few days off if you're sick, and then when you're not symptomatic, return. Or there are things like, oh, you need bereavement. The world's been in omnipresent chaos, and we're witnessing death, loss. And you get 3 days of bereavement off, you'll be fine. We know that that's not how it works. So a lot of these shifts are like, yes, things that we've needed now, but I think that they've been things that we long needed without any introduction to these other thoughts. But as one of our closing thoughts, Michael, I want to pass it back to you. You have your hand raised, and I know whatever your offering is, it's going to be delicious. I think they might be frozen.
He's frozen.
on a cliffhanger, let's go ahead and see if we're lucky enough for them to come back for us. But one of the final thoughts and closings that I do want to leave us out here with is I see here in Andre's graphic of us all, at the very bottom of the illustration, it says move into a space of liberation. So in a quick closing, I would love to hear just maybe a few words, maybe just a brief term that's coming to you of how we can move into a space of liberation from here. So I'll model, and then this time I'll go ahead and pass to Paradise next. One of the hopes or ideas that I have of how we can move into a space of liberation are to keep learning from each other. I know that it's really collective and that we don't have all the answers, and that together we know a lot. So one of my hopes for moving into a space of liberation are more shared learning spaces like this. Paradise, I'll pass to you before we close out.
Yeah, I think that my word is one that I hear you say a lot, Nish. But I think one of the ways that we can move into a space of liberation is curiously. I feel like when I stay curious personally, I'm able to be more creative and think of options and resources that I might not have.
Thank you. And I see folks in the chat as well sharing their ideas as well. So thank you for that. And Maribel, I would love to know what's coming up for you for how we can move into a space of liberation from here.
The word safe keeps popping up for me. I think just having a safe space to be able to be curious, but also to express. Yeah, a safe space that can be provided to be able to express not just the good, but the bad and the ugly, all of it, to be able to feel free without any kind of, I don't know, backlash or any kind of bullying or any kind of way that I could just, everyone could just have the space and the opportunity to express themselves in a free way in order to change whatever's going on around us that's maybe somebody else not feeling safe for whatever reason that may be. So safety, safe space, safe.
Thank you for your offering. And Michael, I'm so happy to have you back. I see you join back on. We're closing out with an offering, just a brief way that we can move into liberation. I was going to have Nathana share, and then I would love for you to share your thoughts as well in closing.
I think one thing that's coming up for me is really about courageously loving yourself and knowing that like that whole piece that how do we continue to do this work if we're not restoring ourselves? Like that's a huge piece, right? And so it's really about how are you courageously loving yourself and taking care of yourself so that we can all be collectively at that space. And so allowing yourself to be loved and appreciating who you are and all the gifts that you bring. I think each of us has that in us, and some days may be harder than others, but how do we take each step to ensure that we're well and that we're whole, so that we can continue the work and continue to create those beloved communities in each of the areas that we serve.
Thank you for that hope and offering. And Michael, from here, where do we go? How do we move into spaces of liberation for ourselves and our beloved community?
Nathan, I kind of started off like where my mind immediately went, you know, as folks that are often from communities that are historically marginalized, underserved, oppressed, etc. Some of that gets into our own psyches, and we talk ourselves out of the things that we deserve and the things that we are worth. And so in our community drop-in center, we have just started putting affirmations around the building, things that say like trans people deserve nice things. Trans people are worthy, right? And so if we can change some of the narrative and mindset within ourselves, so that we understand that we are worth everything, like that we deserve the finest things in life, whatever that means to us. It doesn't necessarily have to be material, but that we deserve the very best that life has to offer, and that our communities deserve the very best. Then it's a little bit harder to take away our freedom and to take away our liberation when we say, well, wait, we deserve. This is ours for the taking, right? And so that's definitely been something to keep in the back of my head whenever I'm feeling a little less than. It's like, no, you're royalty, you deserve, these things are yours, you just have to reach out and take them.
Ashe. Yeah, we are, and so I am. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And I would love to just keep sitting here asking y'all questions, kikiing until the end of time. And I know that there's only so much more space for that. So Lavon, I'm gonna pass it back to you, but I offer my deepest gratitude for you all and for allowing me to ask as many questions as I did from you.
Okay, wow. Ashe, Ashe, you all are amazing. Nish, thank you so much for leading, facilitating, adding so much value into this space with these awesome, awesome speakers, presenters, advocates, right? As I was listening to everyone speak, courageously loving yourself. I absolutely love that. I wrote it down. I really did. I wrote it down because I love that when you said that, Nathana, courageously loving yourself. And one of the words for me, Nish, that came up was when we move in a space of liberation was resistance. And these programs, these presenters, that's what I get. Resistance, and because resistance isn't about a physical thing all the time, right? It's in the way that we show up and the approaches we put forth to work outside of the systems that, as Michael mentioned earlier, that are there not to help us, but to keep us right where we are, and therefore into nothingness. So thank you all so much. That's just my little soapbox, if I may add that. So as we are closing, and since I have the mic, right? So thank you. And I know we are at time, over time. And as we bring this to a close, right? Wow. At this point, we would love to highlight the graphic illustration that Andre Medina was able to capture for us today. Please note that this is not the high resolution version. The final illustration will be available to all participants in both English and Spanish. A special thank you to all of today's presenters again, and to our amazing interpretation team. Please join us in celebrating our partners and staff who made this event possible by sharing your reactions and appreciation in the chat. We thank you for that. Before we close, we would love to invite you again on behalf of the National IPV Prevention Council to participate in our National Prevention Scan. This survey will help to capture innovative strategies to sustain prevention across the United States through creative funding and critical partnerships. We would love to include your voice and experience. The scan is on the screen, as you all can see. And again, beforehand, we thank you for your participation in working with us in this venture. And please, 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 before you leave today, please be sure to share your feedback with us at the evaluation link. Your input helps to guide the future direction of NRCDV's prevention work. Thank you for joining this year's National Prevention Town Hall. So from me, all the staff at NRCDV and the participants and the committee, we thank you so very much for being with us on this second day. And we bid you all a great day and be safe. I'm in the midst of a hurricane weather here in Atlanta, but all is well. I'm safe. So thank you all so much.